On a Thursday evening in early October, Marcus Chen stood in the parking lot of a Cornerstone family dining restaurant in South Haven, Mississippi, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as his franchise manager, a white man in his early 40s named Dale Pritchard, approached a black family of 5 who had just walked through the front doors at 6:45 and said in a voice loud enough to carry across the half-empty dining room, "I am sorry, but we are closed for a private event. Tonight, you are going to need to find somewhere else to eat," even though Marcus could see at least a dozen other customers, all of them white, sitting at tables eating their meals, even though the open sign was still illuminated in the window, even though the restaurant's posted hours clearly stated that Cornerstone was open until 10 o'clock every night of the week. Marcus, who was 46 years old and the founder and CEO of Cornerstone Family Dining, a chain of 137 casual dining restaurants across the South and Midwest with annual revenues exceeding $400 million, who had built the company from a single location in Memphis 22 years earlier on the principles of hospitality, community, and treating every customer like family, felt something inside him go very cold and very still as he watched the black family, a mother and father and 3 children who looked to range in age from about 6 to 12, stand in the entryway looking confused and embarrassed, while Dale repeated, more firmly this time, "We are closed. You need to leave." Marcus Chen was not actually named Chen by birth. He had been born Marcus Antoine Washington in North Memphis, the youngest of 4 children raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them housed and fed. The Chen had come later from his wife Lily, whom he had met in culinary school and married when they were both 23, and broke and dreaming of opening their own restaurant someday. Lily was second-generation Chinese-American, and when they married, Marcus had taken her last name, partly because he loved her and partly because he wanted to signal a break from his past, a fresh start, a new identity built on what he would create rather than what he had inherited. They had opened their first Cornerstone location in 1995, a small family-style restaurant in a mixed-income neighborhood in Memphis, serving comfort food made from scratch with generous portions and affordable prices. The concept had been simple: make people feel welcome, serve them good food, and create a place where families could gather without breaking the bank. The restaurant had been an immediate success. Marcus and Lily had worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, with Marcus in the kitchen and Lily managing the front of house. They had hired carefully, trained thoroughly, and treated their staff with respect and fair wages. And word had spread. Within 2 years, they had opened a second location. Within 5 years, they had 8. And by the time Marcus was 35, Cornerstone Family Dining had become a regional phenomenon, with locations across Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Alabama. The company had gone public in 2010, and Marcus had used the capital to expand aggressively, opening franchises and company-owned locations, building a supply chain, and establishing Cornerstone as a household name in the markets they served. The success had come with challenges. Rapid growth meant hiring thousands of employees, many of whom Marcus never met and never trained personally. Franchising meant relinquishing some control to operators who purchased the right to run Cornerstone restaurants, but who brought their own management styles and sometimes their own biases. And operating across the South meant navigating complex racial dynamics in communities where, despite decades of progress, discrimination was still a lived reality for many black customers and employees. Marcus had tried to build safeguards. Cornerstone had comprehensive anti-discrimination policies. The company provided extensive training on hospitality and inclusion. Franchise agreements included clauses requiring compliance with civil rights laws and company values. And Marcus had established a customer complaint hotline that reported directly to corporate headquarters. But Marcus also knew that policies and training could only do so much. He knew that what happened in individual restaurants, on individual shifts, with individual managers, was where the culture was really tested. And he knew that as the company grew, it became harder to maintain the standards he and Lily had set in that first location. Which was why, several times a year, Marcus made unannounced visits to cornerstone locations, sometimes company-owned and sometimes franchised, to see for himself how the restaurants were operating when no one knew the CEO was watching. He dressed casually, drove a rental car, and observed. Most of the time, what he saw was good. Staff who were friendly and professional, managers who were running tight operations, customers who were happy. But occasionally, he saw things that concerned him. And when that happened, he took action. The South Haven location was a franchise owned by a man named Gary Sullivan, who had purchased the rights to operate 5 cornerstone restaurants in northern Mississippi. Gary had been a franchisee for 6 years, and by most metrics, his locations were performing well. Sales were strong. Health inspection scores were good. Employee turnover was in line with industry averages. But about 3 months ago, Marcus had started receiving complaints through the corporate hotline about the South Haven location specifically. The complaints had a pattern. Black customers reporting that they had been treated rudely, made to wait longer than white customers, or, in a few cases, told that the restaurant was closed or fully booked when they could clearly see that it was not. The complaints were not overwhelming in volume, maybe 8 or 10 over the course of 3 months, but they were consistent enough to raise a red flag. Marcus had assigned someone from the corporate compliance team to look into it, and that person had called the franchise, spoken to Dale Pritchard, and been assured that there was no issue, that any complaints were isolated misunderstandings, and that the restaurant was committed to serving all customers equally. The compliance officer had documented the call and closed the file, but the complaints had continued, and so Marcus had decided to see for himself. He had driven down from Memphis that afternoon, arriving in South Haven around 6:30, and had parked in the lot where he could observe the entrance and the dining room without being conspicuous. He had been watching for about 15 minutes when the Black family arrived. They had pulled up in a Toyota Camry that had seen better days, and Marcus had watched the mother, a woman who looked to be in her late 30s, shepherd her 3 children out of the car and toward the entrance, the father bringing up the rear. They had walked in looking like any other family on a Thursday night, tired and hungry and hoping for a decent meal. And then Dale Pritchard had intercepted them. Marcus stood in the parking lot, his hands in his pockets, and watched as the father, a tall man in work clothes, said something to Dale that Marcus could not hear. Dale shook his head, pointed toward the door, and said something else. The mother put a protective hand on her oldest child's shoulder, and Marcus could see the confusion and hurt on her face. Then the father nodded, gathered his family, and they walked back out through the doors. Marcus followed them with his eyes as they got back into their Camry, the children climbing into the back seat, the parents sitting in the front for a moment without starting the engine. Marcus could not see their expressions from where he stood, but he could imagine them, the humiliation, the anger, the exhaustion of being turned away from a public restaurant for reasons they understood all too well, even if they could not prove. Finally, the Camry's engine started, and the family pulled out of the parking lot and drove away. Marcus waited until the car was out of sight. Then he walked across the parking lot, through the entrance, and into the Cornerstone family dining restaurant that bore his company's name, his logo, his brand. Dale Pritchard was standing near the host stand, talking to a server, and he glanced up as Marcus walked in. His expression was pleasant, professional, welcoming. He saw a well-dressed Asian man in business casual attire, someone who fit his mental image of a customer worth serving. "Good evening, sir," Dale said, smiling. "Welcome to Cornerstone. Just one tonight?" Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "Actually, I am Marcus Chen. I own this company, and we need to talk." Dale's smile froze. The color drained from his face. And in that moment, Marcus saw recognition, then fear, then a desperate scramble to figure out what to say. But there was nothing to say, because Marcus had seen what he had seen, and everything was about to change. If you have ever wondered how discrimination persists in supposedly welcoming spaces, hit that like button, because what Marcus uncovered over the next several hours would reveal a pattern so entrenched that dismantling it would require not just firing one manager, but rebuilding an entire franchise operation from the ground up. Marcus walked past Dale to the host stand, where a young white woman in a Cornerstone uniform was staring at him with wide eyes, clearly having overheard his introduction. Marcus looked around the dining room. There were about 30 customers scattered across the tables. Every single one of them was white. He looked at the servers moving through the room, all white. He looked at the cooks visible through the kitchen window, all white. He looked back at Dale. "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Dale swallowed. Yes, my office, back here." Marcus followed Dale through the dining room, past the kitchen, and into a small office that smelled like stale coffee and paperwork. Dale closed the door and turned to face Marcus, his hands fidgeting. "Mr. Chen, I had no idea you were coming. If I had known, I would have—" "You would have what? Treated that black family with respect, let them eat here like the paying customers they were trying to be?" Dale's face flushed. "I do not know what you are talking about. Do not lie to me, Dale. I was standing in the parking lot. I watched you tell that family you were closed for a private event. I watched you turn them away, and I can see that you are not closed and there is no private event. So why did you do it?" Dale looked away. "There must have been some kind of misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "I do not know. Maybe they came in at the wrong time. Maybe I thought—" Marcus cut him off. "Stop. Just stop. I saw what happened. You saw a black family walk in, and you decided they did not belong here. That is what happened, and I want to know why." Dale was silent for a long moment. Then he said, his voice defensive, "Look, I run a good restaurant. My numbers are strong. Customers are happy. I do not know what a couple of isolated incidents—" "Isolated incidents? Dale, we have been receiving complaints about this location for months. Black customers saying they were treated differently, saying they were turned away, and now I have seen it with my own eyes. This is not isolated, this is a pattern." Dale's jaw tightened. "Those complaints are exaggerated. People make things up. They want free meals. They play the race card." Marcus felt his anger flare, but he kept his voice calm. "The race card, that is what you think this is about. I am just saying, not every complaint is legitimate." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I am going to ask you one more time. Why did you turn that family away?" Dale did not answer. Marcus opened the voice memo app on his phone and hit record. "This is Marcus Chen, CEO of Cornerstone Family Dining. It is Thursday, October 5th, 6:52 p.m. I am at the South Haven, Mississippi franchise location. I've just witnessed the manager, Dale Pritchard, turn away a black family of 5 by falsely claiming the restaurant was closed for a private event. I am now documenting this conversation. Dale, can you explain why you turned that family away?" Dale stared at the phone. "You are recording me?" "I am documenting what I saw. Answer the question." Dale looked trapped. I do not have to answer your questions without a lawyer." "You are absolutely right. You do not have to answer anything. But I am the CEO, and this is my company, and you are a manager at a franchise that operates under my brand. So you can answer my questions now, or you can answer them later with your lawyer present. But either way, you are going to answer them." Dale sat down heavily in his chair. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth. Why did you turn that family away?" Dale was quiet for a long time. Then he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Because I did not want them here." Why?" "Because they bring down the atmosphere. Because other customers do not like it. Because it is just easier if they go somewhere else." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. "Other customers do not like it. You mean white customers do not want to eat near black customers?" Dale shrugged. "I did not make the world, Mr. Chen. I just work in it. You did not make the world, but you made the choice to discriminate. You made the choice to violate federal civil rights laws. You made the choice to betray everything Cornerstone stands for, and now you are going to face the consequences. Marcus stopped the recording and put his phone away. You are fired. Effective immediately. Gather your personal belongings and leave the property. You have 15 minutes. Dale's face went red. You cannot fire me. I do not work for you. I work for Gary Sullivan. He is the franchisee. Only he can fire me. You are right. Technically, you work for Gary. But Gary operates under a franchise agreement with Cornerstone, and that agreement gives me the authority to require the removal of any employee who violates company policies or engages in illegal conduct. Discrimination is both, so you are done here. If Gary wants to fight it, he can try, but I would not recommend it. Dale stood up, his hands shaking. This is bullshit. You cannot prove anything. I have a recording of you admitting that you turned away customers because of their race. I have months of complaints documenting a pattern, and I have my own eyewitness account. I can prove everything. Now get out. Dale grabbed his jacket and his keys and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. Marcus stood alone in the small room, taking a breath, steadying himself. Then he walked back out to the dining room. The servers and the host were standing near the kitchen, whispering, clearly aware that something significant had just happened. Marcus addressed them. My name is Marcus Chen. I am the founder and CEO of Cornerstone Family Dining. Your manager, Dale Pritchard, is no longer employed here. I am temporarily taking over management of this location until a replacement can be found. In the meantime, we are going to continue serving customers, and we are going to do it the right way. That means every customer who walks through that door is welcomed with respect and courtesy, regardless of their race, their appearance, or anything else. If anyone has a problem with that, you can leave now. No one moved. Marcus nodded. Good. Let us get back to work. He spent the next 3 hours at the restaurant talking to staff, reviewing operations, and watching how the team functioned. He called Gary Sullivan, the franchisee, and informed him that Dale had been terminated and why. Gary had been shocked, defensive, and ultimately resigned to the decision once Marcus explained the legal exposure. And Marcus called his chief operating officer, a woman named Sandra Okafor, who had been with Cornerstone for 12 years, and briefed her on what had happened. I need you to get down here tomorrow, Marcus said. We need to do a full audit of this location and all of Gary's other franchises. I want to know if this is isolated to Dale or if it is systemic. I will be there first thing in the morning, Sandra said. Marcus, are you okay? No, but I will be. Marcus left the restaurant around 10:30 after closing. He drove to a nearby hotel and checked in, and then he sat in his room and called Lily, his wife, who was at their home in Memphis. How did it go? Lily asked. Marcus told her everything. When he finished, Lily was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make sure this never happens again, not just at this location, but across the entire company. That is a big undertaking. I know. But what is the alternative? Pretend it did not happen. Let it continue. I built Cornerstone to be a place where everyone is welcome. If it is not that, then what is the point? I am proud of you, Lily said, and I am here if you need me. I know. I love you. I love you too. Marcus hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted and angry and determined. He thought about the black family who had been turned away, wondered where they had ended up eating dinner, wondered what they had told their children about why they had been rejected, and he promised himself that he would find them, that he would apologize, and that he would make this right, not just for them, but for every black customer who had ever been made to feel unwelcome in a Cornerstone restaurant. Because if his company was contributing to the problem, then he had a responsibility to fix it, and that was exactly what he was going to do. Over the next 2 weeks, Sandra Okafor led a comprehensive audit of the South Haven location and Gary Sullivan's 4 other franchises. The audit included reviewing security camera footage, interviewing employees, analyzing customer complaint data, and conducting secret shopper tests where black and white customers were sent to the restaurants under identical circumstances to see if they were treated differently. The results were damning. The audit found that the South Haven location had a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior, not just from Dale, but from other staff members as well. Black customers waited longer to be seated, received slower service, and were more likely to have their orders prepared incorrectly. The secret shopper tests showed that black customers were greeted less warmly, offered fewer menu recommendations, and checked on less frequently during their meals. But the problems were not limited to South Haven. The audit found similar patterns at 2 of Gary Sullivan's other locations, though not as severe. And when Sandra expanded the investigation to include a random sample of other Cornerstone franchises across the company's footprint, she found troubling trends. About 15% of locations showed signs of differential treatment based on race, ranging from subtle differences in service quality to outright exclusion. The data was undeniable. Cornerstone Family Dining had a problem. Marcus reviewed the findings in his office in Memphis, Sandra sitting across from him. "How did this happen?" Marcus asked. "We have policies, we have training, we have complaint mechanisms. How did we miss this?" Sandra chose her words carefully. "The policies and training are good, but they are not enough. Because what we are dealing with is not just individual bad actors, it is a culture problem in some locations. Managers hire people who share their biases. They create environments where discrimination is normalized. And employees who see it happen do not report it because they do not think anything will change, or because they are afraid of retaliation. So what do? We need a multi-pronged approach. First, we terminate the franchise agreements for any operators who are unwilling or unable to meet our standards. Second, we overhaul our training programs to include more robust anti-discrimination and unconscious bias components. Third, we establish a more effective complaint system with third-party oversight so that employees and customers feel safe reporting issues. Fourth, we audit all of our locations regularly, using secret shoppers and data analysis to identify problems before they escalate. And fifth, we make it clear from the top down that discrimination will not be tolerated, period. Marcus nodded. Do it. All of it. And Sandra, I want to add one more thing. I want to find the family that Dale turned away. I want to apologize to them personally. Can we track them down? We can try. The security footage might have captured their license plate. Let me see what I can do. Sandra left, and Marcus sat in his office, thinking about the enormity of the task ahead. Firing Dale had been easy, but fixing the culture, rebuilding trust, ensuring that Cornerstone lived up to its values, that was going to take years, and it was going to be expensive, disruptive, and painful. But Marcus had built this company on the belief that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, and he was not going to let that belief be compromised, not on his watch. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that true leadership means taking responsibility for the culture you create, because what Marcus did over the next several months would test every principle he believed in about accountability, transparency, and the courage to dismantle systems that harm people even when those systems are profitable. 3 days after the audit report, Sandra called Marcus. "We found them, the family from South Haven. Their name is Johnson. Marcus and Keisha Johnson and their 3 kids. They live in South Haven, and Keisha works as a nurse at a local hospital. Do you want me to reach out to them?" "Yes, but I want to do it in person. Can you set up a meeting?" "I will try." Sandra reached out to the Johnsons through a mutual contact, and after some initial hesitation, they agreed to meet with Marcus. The meeting was arranged for the following Saturday at a coffee shop in South Haven. Marcus arrived early, nervous in a way he had not been in years. He was about to apologize to people he had wronged, or at least people his company had wronged, and he did not know how they would respond. The Johnsons arrived right on time, just Marcus and Keisha without the children. They were both in their late 30s. Marcus tall and broad-shouldered in a work jacket, Keisha petite and composed in scrubs that suggested she'd come straight from a shift. They sat down across from Marcus, their expressions guarded. Marcus introduced himself, even though they clearly knew who he was. "Thank you for meeting with me. I know this is uncomfortable, and I appreciate your willingness to hear me out." Keisha looked at him evenly. "We are here because Sandra said you wanted to apologize. So go ahead." Marcus took a breath. "I am deeply sorry for what happened to you and your family at the South Haven Cornerstone. You should have been welcomed. You should have been served with respect. Instead, you were turned away because of your race. That is unacceptable, and it is a betrayal of everything Cornerstone is supposed to stand for. I take full responsibility, and I'm committed to making sure it never happens again." Marcus waited. Keisha and Marcus Johnson exchanged a glance. Then Keisha said, "Do you know what that felt like? To have our kids in the car, excited about going out to eat, and then to be told we could not come in? To drive away and have our oldest ask why the man said we had to leave? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" "I can only imagine," Marcus said, "and I am sorry, not just as the CEO, but as a person. What happened to you was wrong, and I am going to do everything in my power to make sure it does not happen to anyone else." Marcus Johnson spoke for the first time, his voice low and measured. "We have been dealing with this our whole lives. Stores following us around, restaurants making us wait while white customers get seated immediately, cops pulling us over for no reason, and every time we are told it is a misunderstanding, or that we are being too sensitive, or that it is not about race. But we know what it is, and we are tired." "I understand," Marcus said, "and I am not going to insult you by pretending I know what that is like, because I do not. But I do know that my company contributed to that pain, and I am committed to fixing it." Keisha leaned forward. "How? How are you going to fix it? Because we have heard apologies before, and nothing changes." Marcus told them about the audit, the findings, the terminations, the new training programs, the complaint system overhaul. He told them about the decision to audit all Cornerstone locations and to terminate franchise agreements with operators who would not meet the standards. And he told them about his plan to make Cornerstone a leader in the industry when it came to inclusion and anti-discrimination. When he finished, Keisha said, "That is a lot of talk, but talk is cheap. How do we know you are serious? Because I am going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to publish annual reports on our progress, including data on customer complaints, employee diversity, and secret shopper results. I'm going to establish an independent oversight board to review discrimination claims. And I'm going to make it clear to every franchisee, every manager, every employee, that if they discriminate, they are out. No second chances." Marcus Johnson looked skeptical. "And what about us? What do we get out of this?" Marcus had anticipated this question. "I would like to offer you and your family free meals at any Cornerstone location for the next 5 years. I would also like to make a donation in your name to a charity of your choice. And if you are open to it, I would like to involve you in the development of our new training programs to make sure we are addressing the real issues that customers like you face." Keisha and Marcus exchanged another glance. Then Keisha said, "We will think about it. But Mr. Chen, here is the thing. We do not want free meals. We want to be able to walk into a restaurant and be treated like everyone else. That is all we have ever wanted. So if you are serious about change, prove it. Do the work. And maybe then we will believe you." They stood up to leave, and Marcus stood as well. "Thank you for your time. And again, I am truly sorry." Keisha paused at the door. "There is one more thing. That manager, Dale. Did you fire him?" "Yes, immediately." "Good. Because he did not just discriminate against us. He taught everyone in that restaurant that it was okay to treat black people like we do not matter. And that is the real problem, not just one person, but the culture he created. I understand, and that is what I'm trying to change. The Johnsons left, and Marcus sat back down, feeling the weight of the conversation. They were right. Talk was cheap. He needed to prove through action that Cornerstone was serious about change. And that was exactly what he was going to do. Over the next 6 months, Marcus led a transformation of Cornerstone family dining that was unprecedented in the casual dining industry. The company terminated franchise agreements with 12 operators who were unwilling or unable to meet the new anti-discrimination standards, representing a total of 38 locations. Some of those locations were sold to new franchisees who committed to the standards. Others were converted to company-owned operations, and a few were closed entirely. Marcus also overhauled the training program. Every employee, from servers to cooks to managers, was required to complete an 8-hour anti-discrimination and unconscious bias training with annual refreshers. The training was developed in partnership with civil rights organizations and included input from the Johnsons, who ultimately agreed to participate in the development process. The training covered not just the legal requirements, but the moral imperative of treating every customer with dignity, and it included real-world scenarios and role-playing exercises to help employees recognize and respond to bias. The complaint system was also redesigned. Cornerstone hired an outside firm to operate a confidential hotline where employees and customers could report discrimination without fear of retaliation. The firm investigated every complaint, and serious allegations were escalated to an independent oversight board that included civil rights advocates, community leaders, and former regulators. The board had the authority to recommend discipline up to and including termination, and their recommendations were published in an annual transparency report. The secret shopper program was expanded. Cornerstone hired a diversity consulting firm to conduct quarterly tests at all company-owned and franchise locations, using Black, Latino, Asian, and white shoppers under identical circumstances. The results were compiled into a database, and locations that showed patterns of differential treatment were flagged for additional training and oversight. Persistent problems led to termination of managers or franchise agreements. And Marcus established a Diversity and Inclusion Council chaired by Sandra Okafor that included employees from across the company, franchise owners, community leaders, and customers. The council met quarterly to review progress, discuss challenges, and make recommendations for continued improvement. The changes were expensive. Cornerstone spent over $20 million in the first year on training, audits, legal fees, and franchise buyouts. The company's profits took a hit, and some investors grumbled about the costs. But Marcus held firm. He told shareholders that building a sustainable, ethical company was more important than short-term profits, and that Cornerstone's long-term success depended on its reputation as a place where everyone was welcome. The changes were also disruptive. Some long-time employees and franchise owners resisted, saying that Cornerstone was overreacting or that the company was sacrificing efficiency for political correctness. A few high-profile defections made headlines, including a franchisee who went on conservative talk radio to complain about being forced to undergo woke indoctrination. But for every person who left, 2 more stepped up to support the transformation. And Marcus made it clear that anyone who could not commit to treating all customers with dignity was welcome to take their business elsewhere. 2 years after the incident in South Haven, Marcus received a letter from Keisha Johnson. It was handwritten on plain paper, and it said, "Mr. Chen, I wanted you to know that my family and I visited the South Haven Cornerstone last week. We were nervous, but we decided to give it a try. And I have to tell you, the experience was completely different. The new manager greeted us warmly. The server was attentive and kind, and for the first time in a long time, we felt like we were just another family out for dinner. Thank you for keeping your promise. It means more than you know. Marcus read the letter 3 times, and each time he felt a lump in his throat. This was why he had done it. Not for the accolades or the publicity, though those had come, but for the Johnsons and families like them, who deserved to be treated with respect and dignity every single time they walked into a Cornerstone restaurant. 5 years after the South Haven incident, Cornerstone Family Dining was a different company. The transformation had been challenging, but it had also been successful. Customer satisfaction scores had increased, particularly among Black and Latino customers. Employee retention had improved, and Cornerstone had been recognized by multiple civil rights organizations as a leader in the hospitality industry when it came to diversity and inclusion. But Marcus knew the work was not done. Discrimination was not something you solved once and then moved on from. It required constant vigilance, constant effort, constant willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, and Marcus was committed to that work for as long as he led the company. On a Saturday afternoon in October, exactly 5 years after he had stood in the South Haven parking lot and watched Dale Pritchard turn away the Johnson family, Marcus returned to the restaurant. It was under new management now, run by a Black woman named Angela Hayes, who had been with Cornerstone for 10 years and had risen through the ranks from server to manager to regional supervisor. Marcus walked in unannounced, just as he had 5 years earlier, and looked around. The dining room was full, a mix of families, couples, and groups of friends. The customers were diverse, Black and white and Latino and Asian, all of them being served by a staff that was equally diverse. Marcus watched as Angela greeted a Black family at the door, smiling warmly, showing them to a table, making sure they had everything they needed. It was a small moment, an ordinary moment, but it was also profound, because it was what should have happened 5 years ago. And now it was happening every day. Angela spotted Marcus and walked over, grinning. "Mr. Chen, I did not know you were coming. Is this an inspection?" Marcus smiled. "Just checking in. How are things?" "Things are great. We are having our best quarter in years. The team is strong, and I am proud of the culture we have built here." "I am proud of you, Angela. You have done an incredible job. I learned from the best. You and Sandra taught me that hospitality means treating everyone like they matter, and that is what we do here." Marcus looked around the dining room one more time, feeling a sense of peace. This was what Cornerstone was supposed to be, a place where everyone was welcome, a place where families could gather and share a meal without fear of judgment or exclusion. A place where the values he and Lily had started with 22 years ago were not just slogans on the wall, but lived realities. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because the lesson here is not just about one restaurant or one incident, but about the responsibility we all have to confront discrimination when we see it, to rebuild systems that are broken, and to believe that a more just world is possible if we are willing to do the work to create it. 10 years after the South Haven incident, Marcus stood on a stage at a hospitality industry conference in Orlando, delivering a keynote address on diversity and inclusion in the restaurant business. The audience was made up of restaurant owners, executives, and managers from across the country, and Marcus had been invited to share Cornerstone's story. "I want to tell you about a night in October 2017. Marcus began, "when I stood in a parking lot and watched one of my managers turn away a Black family by lying and saying we were closed. That moment changed everything for me, because I realized that all the policies and training in the world did not matter if the culture on the ground was broken. And I realized that I had a choice. I could ignore the problem, hope it went away, and protect the short-term profitability of the company, or I could confront it, no matter how hard or expensive or disruptive it was, and do the right thing." He paused, looking out at the audience. I chose to confront it, and I am here to tell you that it was the hardest thing I have ever done as a CEO. We lost franchisees, we lost employees, we spent millions of dollars on training and audits and oversight. Our profits took a hit. And there were moments when I wondered if I was making a mistake, if I was being too idealistic, if I should just focus on running a profitable business and leave the social justice work to someone else. Another pause. But I did not make a mistake. Because 10 years later, Cornerstone is stronger than it has ever been. Our customer satisfaction is up, our employee retention is up, our brand reputation is up. And most importantly, we have become a place where everyone, regardless of their race or background, can walk in and feel welcome. That is not just good ethics, it is good business. The applause was sustained, and after the speech, Marcus was approached by dozens of people who wanted to talk, to share their own struggles with discrimination in their businesses, to ask for advice on how to create more inclusive cultures. Marcus talked to all of them, and he gave them the same message. Start by acknowledging the problem, invest in real change, hold people accountable, and be willing to sacrifice short-term profits for long-term sustainability. One person who approached Marcus was a young black woman named Tasha Williams, who introduced herself as the owner of a small chain of soul food restaurants in Houston. She shook Marcus's hand, her eyes bright with emotion. Mr. Chen, I just want to say thank you. I have faced discrimination my whole life as a customer, and then as a business owner, people assumed I could not run a successful restaurant because of how I looked. Your story gives me hope that things can change, and it inspires me to do the same work in my own business. Marcus smiled. You do not need my inspiration, Tasha. You are already doing the work just by being here, by building something, by refusing to accept that the world has to be the way it is. Keep going. And if you ever need advice or support, reach out. We are all in this together. Tasha thanked him and walked away, and Marcus stood in the conference hall, feeling the weight and the privilege of the platform he had been given. He had not set out to become a spokesperson for diversity in the restaurant industry. He had just tried to fix a problem in his own company. But in doing so, he had become part of a larger movement, a larger conversation about what it meant to run a business ethically, to treat people with dignity, and to use power and privilege to dismantle rather than reinforce systems of exclusion. 15 years after the South Haven incident, Marcus was invited to testify before a congressional committee examining discrimination in the hospitality industry. The hearing was part of a broader investigation into civil rights enforcement, and Marcus was asked to share Cornerstone's experience and to offer recommendations for policy changes. He sat at a witness table in a packed hearing room, cameras rolling, and told the story once again. The problem with discrimination in the restaurant industry, Marcus told the committee, is that it is often invisible to the people in power. Owners and executives are not in the dining rooms when these incidents happen. They are not hearing the comments, seeing the differential treatment, witnessing the exclusion. And even when complaints are filed, they are often dismissed as misunderstandings or one-off incidents. But what I learned is that discrimination is rarely isolated. It is usually systemic. And if you want to address it, you have to be willing to look at the culture, the training, the accountability mechanisms, and the leadership. You have to be willing to make hard decisions and to invest in change. One of the committee members, a congresswoman from Georgia, asked Marcus, "What would you say to business owners who argue that these kinds of changes are too expensive or too disruptive?" Marcus did not hesitate. "I would say that discrimination is expensive. It is expensive in terms of lost customers, damaged reputation, legal liability, and employee turnover. And it is expensive morally. If you are running a business that excludes people based on their race, you are not just hurting those individuals. You are hurting your community and your country. So yes, change is hard, but the alternative is worse. The hearing was covered extensively in the media, and Marcus's testimony was praised by civil rights advocates and criticized by some business groups who argued that he was advocating for government overreach. But Marcus did not engage with the critics. He had learned over the years that you could not convince everyone, that some people would always resist change, and that the best you could do was lead by example and hope that others would follow. 20 years after the South Haven incident, Marcus Chen was 66 years old and considering retirement. He had been CEO of Cornerstone Family Dining for over 2 decades, and while he loved the work, he was ready to pass the torch to the next generation. He had groomed a successor, a woman named Janelle Robinson, who had been with the company for 15 years and who shared Marcus's commitment to inclusion and ethical leadership. The transition was planned for the following year, and Marcus was spending his final months as CEO visiting Cornerstone locations, talking to employees and reflecting on what the company had become. On a crisp October evening, Marcus drove to South Haven, Mississippi, to visit the location where it had all started. He walked into the restaurant, and the first person he saw was Angela Hayes, now a regional director overseeing multiple locations, who had come down for the occasion. Also, there were Keisha and Marcus Johnson, the family who had been turned away 20 years earlier, who had been invited by Angela to join for dinner. And there were several employees who had been with the company for over a decade, who had been part of the transformation. They all gathered around a large table in the center of the dining room, and Marcus looked at their faces, a mix of emotions washing over him. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. 20 years ago, I stood in the parking lot of this restaurant and watched something that broke my heart, and I made a decision that night to do everything in my power to make sure it never happened again. I could not have done it alone. It took all of you and thousands of other people across this company to make the change real. So thank you for your courage, your commitment, and your willingness to believe that we could build something better." Keisha Johnson spoke up. "Mr. Chen, I want you to know that what you did mattered, not just to my family, but to so many others. My kids are grown now, and they work in the service industry, and they have told me that they try to create the same kind of inclusive culture that you built at Cornerstone. You changed more than just a company. You changed lives." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes, but he did not try to hide them. "Thank you, Keisha. That means everything to me." They spent the evening eating and talking and remembering, and when Marcus finally said goodbye and walked out to his car, he paused in the parking lot, the same spot where he had stood 20 years earlier. He thought about Dale Pritchard, the manager who had been fired, and wondered where he was now, whether he had learned anything from the experience. He thought about the dozens of employees and franchisees who had left the company rather than commit to the new standards. And he thought about the thousands who had stayed, who had embraced the change, who had made Cornerstone into what it was today. And he thought about the lesson that night had taught him, that you cannot build a company or a community or a country on exclusion. That discrimination has a cost, not just for the people who are discriminated against, but for everyone, and that the work of justice is never finished, but it is always worth doing. 25 years after the South Haven incident, Marcus Chen passed away peacefully at the age of 71, surrounded by his family. The obituaries noted his accomplishments, his philanthropy, his role in transforming Cornerstone Family Dining into a model of ethical business leadership. But the thing people remembered most was the story of the night he stood in a parking lot and decided to confront discrimination head-on, no matter the cost. At his memorial service, held in Memphis at a church in the neighborhood where he had grown up, speakers from across the country paid tribute to Marcus's legacy. Janelle Robinson, who had succeeded him as CEO, spoke about his leadership and his values. Sandra Okafor, who had retired as COO but remained on the board, spoke about his integrity and his courage, and Keisha Johnson, now in her late 50s, spoke about what his actions had meant to her family and to countless others. Marcus Chen did not have to do what he did, Keisha said, her voice steady. He could have ignored the problem. He could have protected the bottom line. He could have chosen the easy path. But he did not. He chose to do the hard thing, the right thing. And in doing so, he showed all of us that change is possible, that one person in one moment can make a difference. And that the work of justice is not just the responsibility of those who are harmed, but of those who have the power to stop the harm. The service ended with a reception in the church hall, where hundreds of people gathered to share memories and stories. And as they talked, a theme emerged, that Marcus Chen had not just built a successful company, but had used that success to make the world a little bit better, a little bit fairer, a little bit more just. That was his legacy. That was his gift. And that was why, decades after his death, people still told the story of the night he stood in a parking lot and watched a manager turn away a black family and decided that enough was enough. 30 years after the South Haven incident, Cornerstone Family Dining was still operating, still growing, still committed to the principles Marcus and Lily Chen had established. The company now had over 300 locations, annual revenues exceeding $1 billion, and a reputation as one of the most inclusive employers in the hospitality industry. The Cornerstone Foundation, established in Marcus's honor, provided scholarships to young people from underserved communities who wanted to pursue careers in culinary arts and hospitality management. And every October, the company held a day of reflection, where employees gathered to talk about inclusion, to share their own experiences with discrimination, and to recommit to the values that Marcus had fought for. On one such day of reflection, 30 years after it all began, the South Haven location held a special event. Angela Hayes, now retired but still involved with the company, stood in the dining room where she had worked for over 20 years and addressed a crowd of employees, community members, and former colleagues. "This place is special," Angela said, looking around the room. "Not because of the building or the food, though both are excellent, but because of what happened here 30 years ago. Because this is where Marcus Chen drew a line in the sand and said no more. This is where he decided that Cornerstone would be a place where everyone is welcome, no matter their race, their background, or their circumstances. And that decision changed everything. It changed this company, it changed this community, and it changed lives." She paused. "Marcus used to say that discrimination is expensive, that it costs us customers, reputation, and talent. But he also said that the real cost is moral. That when we exclude people, when we make them feel like they do not matter, we lose a piece of our own humanity." And he was right. So as we gather here today, let us remember why this work matters. Not just because it is good for business, though it is, but because it is good for our souls. The applause was warm and sustained, and as people filed out of the dining room afterward, many of them stopped to look at a plaque that had been installed near the entrance. The plaque read, "On this site in October 2017, a moment of injustice became a catalyst for change. May we never forget the cost of discrimination, the courage required to confront it, and the responsibility we all share to build a more just and inclusive world. In honor of Marcus Chen, founder and visionary." And beneath the plaque was a quote from Marcus himself, words he had spoken at the congressional hearing 15 years earlier. "Discrimination is not just wrong because it violates the law. It is wrong because it denies people their dignity. And dignity is not something we give or take away. It is something every person possesses by virtue of being human. Our job is to recognize it, to honor it, and to build institutions that reflect it. That is the work. That is the mission. And that is the legacy I hope to leave." The story of Marcus Chen and Cornerstone Family Dining became a case study taught in business schools, hospitality management programs, and ethics courses across the country. It was used to illustrate the business case for diversity, the importance of ethical leadership, and the power of accountability. And it inspired a generation of entrepreneurs and executives to ask themselves, when confronted with discrimination in their own organizations, what would Marcus Chen do? Because Marcus Chen did not just fire a manager and move on. He undertook a comprehensive transformation of his company, investing millions of dollars, disrupting operations, and making hard decisions that cost him franchisees and profits. He did it because he believed that building a just institution was more important than building a profitable one, or rather, that the only way to build a truly sustainable business was to do it on a foundation of justice. And he was right. 30 years later, Cornerstone Family Dining was thriving, not despite the changes Marcus had made, but because of them. Because customers, particularly Black and Latino customers who had been underserved and mistreated by other restaurants, knew that Cornerstone was a place where they would be welcomed. Because employees, particularly employees of color, knew that Cornerstone was a place where they could build careers without facing discrimination. And because investors knew that Cornerstone was a company with strong values, a loyal customer base, and a sustainable business model. That was Marcus Chen's legacy. Not just the company he built, but the values he embedded in it. The belief that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. The commitment to confronting discrimination wherever it exists. And the understanding that the work of justice is never finished, but is always worth doing. If this story moved you, if it challenged you to think about the institutions you are part of, and the role you play in either perpetuating or dismantling discrimination, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the lesson here is not just about one CEO or one company. It is about all of us, about the choices we make when confronted with injustice, about the courage required to do the right thing even when it is hard. And about the belief that a more just world is possible, not because it is inevitable, but because people like Marcus Chen refuse to accept anything less. That is the story. That is the legacy. And that is why, decades after Marcus Chen stood in a parking lot and watched a manager turn away a Black family, people still remember, still tell the story, still draw inspiration from it. Because it reminds us that one person, in one moment, can change everything. That discrimination has consequences. That accountability matters. And that the work of building a more just world belongs to all of us, not just those who are harmed by injustice, but those who have the power to stop it. Marcus Chen used that power, and in doing so, he showed us all what is possible when we choose courage over comfort, justice over profit, and human dignity over every other consideration. That is the lesson. That is the challenge. And that is the work that continues in every restaurant, every boardroom, every community, until the day when stories like this are no longer necessary, because the world has finally become the place we always knew it could be. A place where everyone is welcome, where everyone is valued, where everyone is treated with the dignity they deserve. That was Marcus Chen's vision. That was his gift. And that is the legacy we inherit.